The Mobile Workforce Podcast. Industry insights, construction perspective.
Hello and welcome back to the Mobile Workforce Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Merrill, and today we are sitting down with Mr. Rob Remington, who is a partner at Hahn & Loescher, and we discuss the industry trends that Rob has seen over his 3+ decades of experience in working with the construction industry. Super excited for you to give this one a listen. I think you'll really enjoy it. Well, welcome on the podcast today, Rob.
Thank you. Great to be here. Appreciate having the opportunity to talk.
Yeah, we're looking forward to the conversation. So can you share with our listeners more of the industry trends that you're talking about here at Converge 2024?
So as it relates to the trends in the industry, and we started our program really by talking a little bit about it, but not really from the perspective of what an economist is seeing or forecasting. That's not what we do. Our perspective that we wanted to bring to the group with respect to industry trends was what we're seeing as construction lawyers. In my group, there's 43 people from New York to San Diego, and our involvement and what we're seeing in the industry day to day and where we're seeing it going. So we tried to offer a little bit more of a perspective of just kind of real life across the United States, what we're seeing and where we're seeing it going in 2024.
Yeah, and I know one of the things that you guys focus on is the subcontractor risk management. So what can you tell us about that and how it relates to what's going on in the industry now?
So, a couple things. One, with where the industry is right now, which is, tremendous growth in the public sector because of the Jobs Act and the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act now. And funds from those beginning to flow the public sector is exploding. The big issue is on the other side of it, we continue to have issues kind of coming out of COVID with supply chain disruption. That has improved, but there are still issues, particularly in specific sectors like electronic components. We're seeing ongoing problems with shortages of labor, and as public projects pull more of the skilled labor, the private projects really suffer. We're seeing a tremendous amount of inflation. So what you're seeing in terms of forecasts that there's going to be industry growth in volume and dollars, a lot of that also is accounted for through inflation. Interest rates the highest they've been in 22 years. And those are all challenges, particularly with respect to private projects. So risk management, kind of coming back to your question, really has become, I think, more important than it ever has been. How to protect the bottom line, protect the profit that you would have on a project, avoid, scope slip where you're doing work that you didn't expect and not getting paid for it, and how to protect yourself, in those regards. And that's really where we tried to focus the second half of our presentation, what you really should be doing and things you should be considering to really protect the bottom line in that regard.
So what were some of those things? Obviously, inflation is where it's at. None of us can do anything to move that rock, but right. What can we do?
So, for us, and we always try to, when we're speaking at these kind of things, we primarily represent contractors, and what we try to sort of convey is, we always see the more difficult side of things. But, it's where we see things potentially going and how you can improve them, we think is, ultimately if we can convey that and get people in good business practice habits, makes a huge difference. So to start, just looking at the scope of your contract, one of the things that we asked in our presentation is how many people sit down and do a scope review. Scope review with the owner, the upstream contractor, this is what our scope is going to be. And we like to convey to our clients and to other, and contractors, we can be as brilliant as can be in terms of putting together a very tight contract, but if you don't have that scope right, there's nothing we can do about it. So it starts, I think, at the beginning of the project, making sure that you're really having a tight understanding of what the scope is for the project. The other piece of it is to know and understand your contract documents. And it's hard to get that, across the importance of that, because oftentimes, when projects go fine, they go fine. It's only when they, when there becomes a problem that those things become an issue. And our point is, understand the key provisions out of the gate. Sit down, take time to make sure that your project manager, your superintendent they understand the notice requirements. Construction contracts, one of the unique aspects of construction contracts is they're dynamic. The owner has to have the ability to change the scope and to make changes, because that's how the process is. And they can't be in breach of contract if all of a sudden they've got to add scope and they're not allowed to do it under the contract. So the reality is they have to have that ability. That's fine. But then you have to know and understand how that process is going to work and make sure that you're protecting your rights by giving the proper notice, and by making the upstream contractors or owners follow their own contract. Because that's where we see a lot of the risk. Is it becomes you have a contract provision where you're waiving all rights if you don't provide proper notice and if you don't get proper authorization. But in the field, you're told, go ahead and do it. We'll deal with it later. And now, you're putting all your eggs in the basket that somehow down the road, if there's a problem, either one, somebody will live up to their word, or two, in a court of law, you're going to prove that they waived their right to enforce that provision. That's an uphill battle. The much easier thing to do is follow those notice requirements. And as part of that, it also sends the right message to the people you're working with, and not a message that you're going to be overly aggressive or that you're going to be unfair or you're going to be difficult to deal with. It's that you're going to follow the terms of the contract, you're going to enforce your rights, and you're going to be, you're going to do exactly what you said you would do under the terms of the contract. So we try to really get our clients and impart that to the contractors we work with, that, that's where it kind of begins, is just, following that contract from day one.
And you're letting the contractor know, hey, we're willing to accommodate you and we're fine with these changes. You just need to pay us for them.
So one of the responses that we got today, which I thought was great in one of the questions, was, what I like to do, this came from a project manager who was here, is I like to just let them know in advance, hey, I'm going to send you this notice. That's what the contract requires. I just want you to know I'm going to do it because I really need to do that to make sure things are clear. But I set the stage for that. And I think that's exactly the right attitude, which is, you don't need to be unnecessarily aggressive, but you do need to send the message that I'm going to follow the contract and I'm going to protect the rights of, my company.
Well, yeah, and acknowledging and letting them know that you are not only aware of those rights, but you're going to follow it.
Exactly. It just sends the right message, because once people see that you're on top of that, you've already created the right atmosphere for people not to think they can take advantage of you. And we also like to point this out, that a lot of times we can be on the other side of these things for upstream contractors. And what's the first thing we do? Is we look, when we've got a pile of claims and a bunch of issues, we look at who followed the contract, because that's just business. And the ones that followed the contract, okay, you're going to have to deal with them appropriately and pursuant to the contract. The ones that didn't, well, those are the ones that you're going to probably negotiate or maybe take a harder position on. Why put yourself in that position?
Wrong pile.
Right.
You don't want to be in that
Wrong pile. Exactly.
All right. So those are some things that we can control. What about legislative updates and things where the government and other entities are coming in and taking control and setting some new rules or changing the rules or doing whatever it is that they're doing?
Well, the big issue, one of the big issues is you're dealing, obviously, particularly if you're dealing in different states, projects in different states, the different states have different laws, different responsibilities, and so, for example, where a pay if paid provision in Ohio is completely enforceable, it's not in New York. And, and contractors that might get used to doing one thing in one state don't realize they can't do it in another. And so, part of it is being aware of what the current legislation is with respect to these issues. But again, I always bring it back to, if you have your contract set up the right way to begin with, most of those issues fall in line.
So once you've done that, and you look back at the tech stack or the technology solutions that a company's utilizing, how important is integration in that ecosystem to make sure that all the bases are being covered by contractors?
Track every dollar for each project with Foundation, America's #1 construction accounting software. Follow the progress of your jobs and track expenses with construction billings, WIP reporting, construction payroll features, and accurate job cost reports. Build profits with precision. Get Foundation today.
You mean in terms of just use of technology, or?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. How and what role does that play in this process to make sure we're avoiding the risks?
So it's evolving every day. From the use of robotics, the use of building information modeling, and those sorts of tools to try to reach the most efficient level of project management that you can. And now, with AI, and you really are seeing it really start to make a difference in terms of just in terms of project efficiency and productivity. The other thing that we're seeing is contractor. One of the things that I talked about today, just in terms of emerging trends, is a real focus on analytics. I use the comparison of Moneyball, the movie with Jonah Hill and Brad Pitt, and the point is that just like in sports analytics, contractors are really starting to look at their actual project data and historical data and figuring out what those trends are and where they can improve productivity, both all the way through from bidding all the way through project management and operation. And I think as those sorts of things build, we're going to see a lot more use of technology across the board, including analytics.
Okay, that's fascinating. AI, again, you're leveraging. People say AI is a buzzword and a term, and some people are scared of it, and other people can't wait to get to it. They don't know what it is, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot of evolution happening. What are you seeing as some common AI tools that maybe people are using and don't even realize it?
It's interesting. It's one of the areas when I talked back in 2022 on this topic, a lot of these things were just starting to emerge, and the question was, how are they going to be utilized? And I have to tell you right now, looking at it, I really don't know the answer of exactly where it's going to come into play and how it's going to come into play, but it certainly is giving every indication that it's going to come into play, and things are going to be evolving and moving pretty quickly going forward. And how that's going to work with respect to our construction contracts, how it's going to work with respect to intellectual property rights and indemnity obligations under our construction contracts, because somehow AI is really come into play. Well, I think we have yet to see exactly how that's going to play out.
So when let's say you're on a project and you've got a dispute where you're claiming damages from somebody else because of something that's going on within the project and it's causing you delays and whatever else, what are you seeing companies do to address that and to kind of get ahead of some of the challenges that you're seeing with current litigation?
So my big thing with particularly with our contractor clients is nothing good happens if you wait. So many times, we get the, let's just wait and see how it plays out. And I think, what I like to remind our clients of is every construction contract on any project of any level of sophistication has a dispute resolution section. And it's there for a reason. It's there to resolve disputes in a civil, professional manner where you just have a disagreement with respect to, a changed condition or an unforeseen condition and you have lien rights. It's fascinating. There are, and I say this to our clients all the time, name one other place that you know of where without any due process whatsoever, you can slap a lien on somebody's property. It's a very unique right that for most states dates back 100 years to protect contractors That was why. Protect contractors and make sure they get paid on projects. And yet, oftentimes, it's the most underutilized. So from my perspective, that's the other aspect is enforce those rights. And a lot of times I go back to the gentleman who made the statement in our program today who said, I let people know in advance. I tell them what I'm doing and I explain why. Same goes with a lien. I haven't been paid. My lien rights are going to run out. I don't have any other choice. I really want to get this worked out. I understand your position, but I have to file this lien. And the reality is once you do that, you go to the top of the list. Because again, on a problem project where there isn't enough money, the first thing that I'm going to do as a lawyer, if I'm on the other side, is I'm going to take all the people that filed their liens and they're going to get paid. And all the people that didn't are not going to get paid, or they're going to get paid cents on the dollar. So it's enforce the rights that you have. The other thing is payment bonds on a bonded project, taking advantage of your payment rights, pursuing those claims, oftentimes really not understood. But again, another way to really, ensure that you're going to get paid, even on a project where your upstream prime contractor has, gone insolvent or disappeared, or he just hasn't done a good job managing the project and there's no money. So in those instances, it's just enforcing your rights, in those areas is a very effective tool. But then beyond that, it's the following the dispute resolution section, and don't wait. The faster you do it and you bring it to a head, even while the project is going on, that's what it's. Most contracts don't limit you to filing whether it's arbitration or litigation, or whether it's mediation and then arbitration, from pursuing those remedies, immediately. Don't wait. It sends the right message. You do it civilly, you do it professionally, but you do it expediently, because that's going to put you in the best position to recover what you're owed with the least amount of cost. Because that's the other piece of it, is the longer you wait and the more you churn and spin your wheels, the more it costs you, both in time and money.
Yeah, and whoever you've got that agreement with, they've consented to give you that tool and agreed that it's fine to use. So what's the problem?
Exactly,
right?
and we do get into it. It's like, well, I don't want to do that because I don't want to upset them. They agreed to it too, and it's their contract. Very rarely are they signing your contract. You're signing their contract.
Right.
And so, that's exactly the point that we try to make is, again, part of this is how you deliver the message, and they may not be happy about it, but again, that is part of doing business. And if you want to protect the bottom line, particularly in this kind of environment, these are the kind of things that you really need to do. And
they also can't honestly and genuinely not understand why you would do that if you haven't been paid and it was in the agreement. It's like what?
And you're not the bank. Yeah. That's the subcontractors. Oftentimes, our clients are they're in the worst position. From a financial position to actually have to fund a project. That's not what they're doing, and yet they get forced into that position. And that's again why coming back and just ensuring that these kinds of things are in place are important to put you in the best position to recover what you're owed.
Yeah, it's interesting. You brought up BIM earlier, and I think back, and AI is what BIM used to be when it was. I remember it was the buzzword, and 7, 8, 10 years ago, and some people, BIM's never going to be anything, and it's like it's here. It's not only relevant, it's amazing and so beneficial and critical in so many projects that we don't even think about it anymore because it's just the way we do business. So.
Absolutely. Project management systems, same thing. You move in and now people really have seen how efficient you can be when you've got a project management tool where everybody can communicate together. And it's actually very helpful, for us as well. And, because when we have the ability to have our experts access records kept in that forum and that kind of a format, it gives everybody the ability to get to basically get to the heart of things, the quickest and most efficient way that you can.
Yeah, not a lot older than I, but you've been around a little longer, probably.
Probably more than you think, right?
So whatever that looks like, I've seen some things. I'm sure you've seen some things as we've gone through this, these changes in construction. We're doing things so differently today than we were even 10 years ago, or even 5 in some cases. So where do you see things going? I mean, what are you keying in on as far as the future goes with the way the technology is going to continue?
Well, clearly technology is going to it's going to be evolving, and how that sort of plays out, I think, is going to be anybody's guess as we move forward. But I think, on that side of things, that will help us be, I think, more efficient, more productive. But I think at the end of the day, the other side of that is, we continue to see, less, willingness to put money into design. So less complete design. And those trends continue, which puts a lot of the issue back on the contractor and those kinds of issues. So I think how it all plays out in the end, or as it advances into the next, 5 to 10 years will be very interesting. But I think we're going to see a lot of changes, particularly on the technology side. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Yeah, and most of us, or many of us, if you've been to events or been around, you may have put the Google goggles on or glasses and done a virtual walk through a building, those things are, I'm seeing them in even model homes and residential now. You're in design centers. You're able to visualize what the cabinetry is going to look like, the carpet, the tile.
Absolutely.
Wow.
It starts in the complex, sophisticated commercial projects, and then as the technology becomes more cost effective, and you're able to, it's able to be afforded down into the residential markets. That's exactly what you're seeing. You're seeing a lot more, prefabricated, modular type construction, again, to save costs, where they figured out we can do this on a mass level. 3D printing, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said now they have 3D printers where they can, it'll cut, stainless steel and iron products to make railings and, things that, 3 or 4 years ago weren't possible. Now you can literally put on a 3D printer and cut it right out, in a matter of hours as opposed to, days and weeks.
Yeah, I've got this steel grid on my front door at my home that was done out of exactly that. And I don't know how much time they saved trying to weld something together, and it wouldn't have looked near so sleek and nice. And it's just perfect. Yeah. It's just one piece of steel and it looks amazing. And it was done with this type of technology.
Right. And I think that technology obviously will drive a lot of the cost down for some of that work. Yeah. And some of that work, you just don't even see. I was in a old courthouse the other day where they had these beautiful cast iron railings, steel railings, whatever they were. And, you looked at them going up 4 stories. In today's world, you never have something like that and be able to really have it be cost effective. But with the advent of some of what's happening with 3D printing, you could see a lot of that kind of stuff coming back.
Yeah, I think of the innovation of technology and those types of tools on one hand, but also on the other, what have you seen us get better at on the people side of things, or what's evolved there?
Well, and this is out of necessity, unfortunately, even more than just good, human nature. And that is, the shortage in skilled labor has, I think, really started. You're starting to see this across the board. 94%, I think the AGC said 94% of contractors are short on skilled labor. And the question is, well, how do we fix that? And part of it is, how do we attract people to our profession? And it has to do with compensating them right, giving them the right incentives. We have contractors now that are offering, bonuses by the week for people that show up every day to work. Have contractors that are having family days where they can take their family out to the project so they can see what their mom or dad have been working on. They have, all kinds of early, what I kind of refer to as almost early childhood education, where you've got our industry associations, AGC, Builders Exchange, and others, actually partnering up with our local, colleges that have construction management programs and engineering programs, and programs where they can start to get and build apprenticeships and really show people that you can have a high-paying career in our industry with real career opportunities. But it comes from really looking at it from the human perspective and saying this is what people want. It also looks at what who we have working and how can we expand that. Recent statistics that I saw from an AGC publication said that of the 12 million or so folks employed in the construction industry in the United States, 94% of them are men. 6.3 or 6.4% are women. And so, the way it was framed in an article I read is this construction industry is trying to operate and pull, people with one arm tied behind its back, because you've got an entire group where you've only got a very small percentage. So part of it is focusing on how can we attract people from all, from the entire population to our industry. And I think that's the challenge. But if you think about it, if you can tap into that other 50%, it solves a lot of problems. And I think those are the kind of things now that are happening, and happening on a good level, because people are realizing part of this is lifestyle. It's all those things that are going to have to be looked at and paid attention to get all the people you need to get these projects done.
Yeah, we've had presidents and members and chapter presidents of NAWIC and people from National Women in Roofing, and we have a gal that you mentioned these education systems that people are putting in place. A gal, Letitia Hankey out in California, who has a program she's put together for local high schools to teach them the trades, and it's young boys and girls that are teenagers, and it's really cool to see some of that good work that's going on. And I think you're right. I mean, we have a problem that we really need to address and figure out how do we recruit more women that are of great talent. And with other technology and AI, and we had a drone pilot gal that was here, worked for a 5,000 employee construction company, and she's flying drones for them for photography and marketing and safety and documentation. And there's all kinds of things that don't involve welding or swinging a hammer or being up on a steel scaffold, right?
Deploying customizable field reports just got easier with WorkMax Forms. Easily capture and upload data from any device. You can convert existing documents into digital forms or select from our library of pre-built forms. Collect real-time information on any device with WorkMax Forms.
Absolutely, and I think it's across the board where we can attract that talent. And a lot of and I think AGC is one. They have the ACE mentoring program where they're reaching down into the high schools, and it's local people in the profession. We're very involved in that in Ohio, big contractors like Gilbane, very involved in really reaching down and starting to make encourage kids to really consider our industry, as they move up into, sort of that decision-making phase of what do they want to be when they get out of high school. So I think all those programs are becoming increasingly important, and I think that's very recognized and accepted by the industry as a whole.
Yeah, so going back to, we talked a lot about project management. What evolution have you seen? I know there's software systems that are in place now. What are are there best practices? Is there new level of awareness? I mean, what are you seeing that is making our project managers more effective today than what they've been in the past? Or is it all software?
Well, it's a good question. I think obviously that's a big part of it. I think just the ability to have these project management tools like Procore or other, where you can, you can communicate across subcontractors, design professionals, owners, to be able to sort of see what's happening day to day on the project. And I think those kinds of things have been obviously an important aspect of at least increasing project efficiency and reducing issues, because the more communication we have, the fewer issues.
Yeah, I know, we kind of joked about it a little earlier, but, you're over 3 decades in this industry. I'm in my 3rd decade now also. What are some lessons learned or things that you've seen or witnessed or been a part of that you think maybe even today's people can learn from people from the past that you've seen?
At the end of the day, at least on the risk management side, it really hasn't changed all that much. It starts with scope, and it's I was thinking about this today when we were answering some of the questions during our presentation, and it really hasn't. I mean, it comes down to the very basic things. Know your scope, be clear on your scope, negotiate your contract documents, and limit your liability. Probably the biggest change that I have seen kind of on the risk management side in that regard is as particularly the AIA contracts have evolved, there's been a lot more. I think it's been much more acceptable now to have waiver of consequential damages, limitation of liability provisions, which I think has been key because those kinds of provisions allow you to at least set your liability at something that's foreseeable and not catastrophic to your company. And so I think, and the fact that those things have become at least more generally accepted has given us the ability to I think, at least move towards a more fairly negotiated contract across the board. And if at a minimum, put yourself in a position where you can limit your liability. So I think that has been probably on the contract side of things, a significant advancement. But beyond that, it really comes down to, protecting your rights, particularly with respect to changes. And a lot of this comes back to the fact that these contracts are dynamic, and which makes them unique. I always say it makes these unique, but it also means that you have to protect your rights because, obviously, if, we remind people today, we ask the question, how many people here when they're filling out a change order, put in the added time that it's going to take them. And you'd be amazed at how many people say, a lot of times you just put in 0. Well, time is money. And when you put in 0 and then down the road the project isn't being done on time, that's impacted you. And you're entitled to be compensated that and also given the time, that it took you the additional time to do that additional work. And so just, again, back to just being aware of making sure that you're following those provisions and protecting your rights, because, that's another area where it doesn't get paid attention to, and then ultimately a dispute develops, and you end up in a situation where, you're not recovering all of the costs that you're entitled to on a project. And really, a lot of that, honestly, has changed very little over the last 30 years.
Same issue, yeah.
Same issue.
Well, and it's interesting. I'm thinking through this. You're talking. The time is never 0, because even the fact that you have to pay extra attention to make sure that everybody saw or got or is adhering to the new update is there's time and resources. And then, heaven forbid, somebody didn't get the memo in their mind, and now they do it wrong, and you're obligated now to make sure and manage them. Ripping it out and redoing it.
The way we oftentimes put it is it's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
So if you're doing additional work, it's impacting something else. You're right. You can't make up that. You can't make that up anywhere else typically, unless you're taking something else. There's a credit someplace else that's removing that. So, you're right. All you're doing at that point in time is just shorting yourself. The other thing I would say that you've really seen a change over the last 30 years is email. When I started, at least for the first 3 years, there was no email at all. And then it kind of moved into you had email within your company, and then all of a sudden it exploded into. And so when you looked at a problem on a project, it was very simple. You're looking at meeting minutes, you're looking at letters, and there obviously were a few letters here and there, but it wasn't like 20 emails a day. and you were looking at change orders and contract documents. Very simple, very straightforward. In today's world, on any kind of complex project, you're talking about oftentimes hundreds of thousands of emails and documents, and managing that. And so a big part of what we do try to counsel with that is how you're corresponding on a project. And we like to basically remind all of our clients that if you didn't put it in writing or you didn't take a picture of it, it never happened. Never happened. And that's because, desperate people do desperate things. Human nature is to revise history. And so you need to make sure that you're documenting it. But what that, of course, does is it means more emails, more letters, more just general project documentation. I mean, in today's world, it's very easy to go out and videotape the condition of a site if there's an issue, or take a picture. You can do it right in the field. Those kinds of things have changed. And I think by and large changed for the better in terms of being able to document what's going on. Made it much more complicated in our world when there's a real dispute, because there's just so much more information.
Yeah, that's the key, is that there's so much data. It's almost data overload. And now the problem is we haven't properly organized that data in a lot of cases. When you've got a third of the conversations in email, half of it's in text, some of it's, again, maybe just physical conversations that happen, verbal agreements. And there's so many things. So
we got on one of the folks in our presentation today said, just kind of generally wanted to know our take on, now on Teams meetings, it's easy to record. So now what do you do with that information? And is that better than, and my view with respect to that kind of thing, frankly, is, one, you always want to get everybody's consent. I don't care one way or the other. It just doesn't look good if you don't, even if it's legal. But two, a recording, even if somebody transcribes it, is just now a huge document. And so summarizing things in meeting minutes that you can control, I really encourage people to do that, because you can put it in a succinct, summary. Here it is, easy to understand, easy to read, and it gives your kind of impression of what happened in the meeting. People can comment on it. Boom, there it is. And it documents what happened in the meeting. If it's a recording, it may sit out there. Now it's subject to interpretation, and it's just a very unwieldy document to deal with. But it's an issue in today's world because it's gotten easier and easier to we'll just record the whole meeting. Okay, it's fine, but I still think good to have a summary.
Yeah. Well, I think the lesson or takeaway, or from what I'm getting from your words, is let's be intentional. Let's intentionally do the things we know we're supposed to be doing. And then, if you need to add other color to it because you have these others, fine. But if you got meeting minutes that are succinct and to the point and put in the right place, you can get to them and you could pull them up and show them to say, hey, I have our meeting minutes. I know we agreed to this. Just so you know, I'm putting this lien on because this is where we're at.
And they just very simply tell the story. And that's a big part of what particularly when you're in a claim situation where now you have a claim, you've been impacted on a project and you've made a claim for additional compensation. And the question is, well, how were you impacted? Having meeting minutes that, that give you a good summary of what happened, having, daily logs that just give you a good summary of, hey, this is what we did today, that aren't garbage in and garbage out, but just very simple. That becomes, really important to sort of being able to show, hey, here's the story. Here's what happened on this project from A to Z, and this is why we're asking for a claim. So that kind of documentation, all good, but again, it's more sort of managing it. And it goes back to even the project management systems that I was talking about. Just having project documentation kept in an orderly fashion, and day to day makes a big difference in terms of, kind of trying to unwind some of these issues after the fact.
Love it. Well, been a great and insightful conversation today. I've really enjoyed talking with you, getting to know you a bit better. Is there anything else, any parting words or any takeaways you hope the audience or listeners would have from our conversation today?
Again, I would just honestly really go back to the fact that, protect your rights. Don't be afraid to do it. Do it professionally. Know your contract. Know what your rights are under the contract. Enforce your lien rights when you need to. don't wait when it's time and you need to, you're not being paid, pursue your contract rights. It's going to put you in the best possible position to be treated fairly, and be fairly compensated for the work that you're doing.
Wise words. Well, thanks again, Bruce. Lots of fun today, and I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the Mobile Workforce Podcast by Foundation Software. To hear more episodes, visit us at workmax.com/Mobile Workforce Podcast, or subscribe to the Mobile Workforce Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast platform. And if you like the show, be sure to leave a 5-star review, share with your colleagues, and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Mobile Workforce Podcast.